get started on the topic of today. I guess you can see the slides there, just confirming that it's working.
Yep.
Good. So the session that I'm going to be talking about today is actually something I did in a couple of weeks ago at the Teams Nation community event, and it's about Dataverse meets Teams. So how this platform enables low-code app opportunities for basically everyone who has Microsoft 365 access. So what I'm going to be talking about is, first of all, a bit about the big picture. So what is Dataverse and where it come from, and why is it so important that that Microsoft wants everyone to be using it? Then I have some examples of real-life applications that me and our team at Forward Forever have been building on top of Dataverse for Teams, showing a bit of different angles on how Dataverse for Teams can make sense for your Power Apps. And then some guidance on when to use it and when not to use it, because there are certain limitations that you should keep in mind when choosing to build on top of Dataverse for Teams in particular. Quick intro from myself. So my name is Jukka Niiranen, and I've been been working with Microsoft Business Apps since 2005. So I've started on the Dynamics CRM side, and been blogging for quite a while, and been an MVP since 2013. And yeah, so when I started, of course, there wasn't any Power Platform at all, but many of the parts that are in it today have originated from the Dynamics side, and Dataverse in particular being a key component there. So these days I'm focused pretty much 100% on Power Platform, and I'm working as a Power Platform advisor and co-founder at Forward Forever. And one common theme that I've been able to kind of hold on to throughout the years is that I don't know how to write code. So I've always been a no-code, low-code kind of a guy working with these tools, but that hasn't really stopped me from building pretty cool stuff on the platforms. And so this Dataverse of Teams really is then about broadening that scope of potential app makers even further, and well, basically getting more people like me into delivering these applications. So first, a few words about Dataverse. I'm sure many of you may know it, especially if you have any Dynamics background, but to kind of set the stage, that what is it and why should you care about it so much? So first of all, we have to remember that despite of the name, it's not just a database. So it really is it's a platform in Power Platform. So it's used for managing security and business logic, integrations, auditing, and especially kind of solution packaging, how to manage the life cycle of your application. So lots of very important things when you go beyond just creating the app, when you want to actually live with it and integrate it further. Then it's a really mature platform, as you can see from my history as well. So I've been using Dataverse long before it was called Dataverse, and it has actually been in Microsoft's cloud already over 10 years, but it has been used by different names like XRM, for example. Then the great thing is that it really caters to both pure citizen developers and then also professional code-first developers. So there's something for everybody there. There's a very extensive graphical user interface where you can build the applications and never write code like basically I do. I copy-paste code, but I don't write it myself. But then there are people who have made a living on extending the Dataverse by the APIs with the SDKs that are available there and building very complex business applications for it. And finally, it really is what Microsoft wants you to use for your Power Apps. So all the efforts, well, not all, but I mean their primary focus is always on making sure that the best experience for building Power Apps is going to be on top of Dataverse. That's their focus. It's not the only tool that they use, but it is their first priority throughout the product stack. Positioning Dataverse for Teams then. So there's now a broad range of different business applications that we can build on top of Dataverse. And today we're talking about the Teams aspect there on the left side. But then there are these two other categories of applications as well, which I here now call Power Apps and Dynamics 365 apps, which are then built on top of the big Dataverse. So the full thing, the premium service. And as you can see from the bottom line there, so the licensing part is the Big differentiator here. So everybody who has access to Teams can basically use Dataverse for Teams. They can build apps on top of it without any extra licensing. Whereas when you go then to more advanced applications, then things also start to get more expensive, and for good reason. If you are using then enterprise scale features from Dataverse, building big line of applications, then yeah, those can be costly, especially on the dynamic side. So they can be the first party applications from Microsoft can be a bit expensive compared to some smaller Office licenses. But so used in various scenarios and catering to a big audience. Now, the benefits of Dataverse for Teams then. So first of all, as mentioned, it's available to everyone who is in Teams, who is a user there, who's a licensed user. So that's, of course, the biggest thing of all. Then the second big question is that, okay, how does this compare to then SharePoint lists or these days Microsoft lists? Well, it really is all about that platform story then. So the things I mentioned there about the life cycle of the application, integration, security model, and all that. So it's designed for this thing, unlike SharePoint lists, which have lots of other use cases as well. Then a great thing compared to the full Dataverse is that it has a simplified model for controlling the access rights to solutions. So there's a tight linkage between the team membership and then who can you do what in the applications that you build within Teams on top of Dataverse for Teams. So the owner member guest OMG model, it then maps into roles within the Dataverse for Teams application, and it is a lot more simplified compared to the full enterprise features in the full Dataverse then. And there are other areas as well where it's simplified by design. So there's kind of only the core set of data modeling and process automation security features that a citizen developer would be needing to build, let's say, simple or mid-complexity applications. You can integrate it with external systems as well, but not in the same way as the full Dataverse. So you need to go to the Azure API management if you want to access then data that doesn't exist within Dataverse for Teams. And the idea there with the lifecycle of the solution is that there's always a way for you to go forward without rebuilding your application. So you can upgrade your Dataverse for Teams environment into full Dataverse and continue using the application. But then, of course, you need to pay for the premium features, which is something that should then be obvious at that point. If you need to build a more advanced application, then features can be purchased from Microsoft Cloud and make it possible for you to evolve the same application further. And how do you then get to try Dataverse these days? So by far the easiest and probably most common pattern is that you go to the Microsoft Teams store and use one of the sample applications from there. So when you go and look at the homepage of the PowerUp's Teams application, then there's a bunch of templates there, like employee ideas or inspections or milestones for project management in lightweight. So these are great examples of what can be built on top of Dataverse for Teams. Now they are fairly advanced, so it would take a lot of effort from me to build something similar to, for example, milestones as a PowerUp. So it's not something necessarily that everybody would be building on their own, but it gives you a good reference point to what can be achieved there. What could examples of features and UIs that can work within Teams built on top of Dataverse for Teams. And so, as mentioned, everybody can be an app maker there. So if you have access to Teams, then not only are you covered by the license, but you also have then the power to create these environments. So if you're a team member, then you can actually go and provision a Dataverse for Teams environment by default. It happens when you create the first app there or install one of those sample applications we saw there in the earlier slide. And so it actually takes lots of effort to try and block this thing from users, which is why then it probably is going to be something that starts popping up in your tenants sooner or later, because users have a nice and easy path towards provisioning these environments. Now, when you do that, you don't actually then consume capacity from the tenant's full Dataverse capacity, but rather there's a dedicated 2 GB storage capacity assigned for each team environment. So again, that's kind of self-service, and you cannot really cause harm to others by creating Teams environments. The number of environments that you can create, that is, it's limited, but it's fairly high if you're in a larger tenant. So everybody gets 5 environments plus then 1 for every 20 users. So let's say that if you have 100,000 users licensed, then you can create 5,000 environments without paying anything in Dataverse for Teams. And you only get 1 environment per 1 team, but then within that environment, you can have many apps installed. So the idea is that if you, for example, have a team for, let's say, IT department, then they could have multiple different apps there in the same environment. So it can scale to fairly large usage even in a single environment, despite of the 2 GB limit there. So then examples of what can be built on top of Dataverse for Teams. So I picked out a few applications here that cover kind of start from very simple to a bit more advanced scenarios there. I'll first show a basic task management application for a very kind of straightforward process. Then I'll talk about a scenario where we have multiple different application UIs for the same data. And then finally, a slightly more advanced UI with responsiveness within teams, and then also a broader distribution outside the members of a singular team. Let's start from the simple scenario. So onboarding application. And the need here, the scenario is that we basically want to have a structured way for onboarding new employees into our organization. So we want to show both to the employee, him or herself, that what are the steps that need to be completed there when they are joining the organization. And then we also want to make it easy for the people who are in charge of guiding or onboarding the users to the organization to complete the steps there. And this is actually internal app that my colleague Timo Pertilä built for us. So it is our actual onboarding experience right now. And we started with having a OneNote-based template list there, which had bullets and checklists for tasks to be completed. And we also created a new copy of it, but that isn't really a pretty solution, and it doesn't really. It's like a digital form of paper, but nothing fancier. So what we built on Dataverse for Teams then was that we created a few tables there for storing the onboarding tasks and the employees. Then we have a business logic for copying the task from a template to a instance for a new employee when they start there. And then we have a slightly modified UI on top of PowerUps to make it easy to track the progress of those tasks. So how does it look like? So first of all, creating tables within Dataverse. So the raw experience for the maker, it's pretty much like this. So we can create as many tables as we need there, and then specify different types of columns there for the data we want to store. So very similar to SharePoint lists. So I'm not going to dive deeper into it. I'm sure that you kind of understand what that experience is like. But then going further, so if we have stuff that we need to manage there, so kind of background data about, for example, what types of onboarding tasks or categories we have there. So within Dataverse for Teams, it already kind of automatically generates a simplified UI for the CRUD operations. So creating new records and editing them via the forms and deleting. So this is actually good enough for many of those kind of admin tasks. You don't need anything fancier for users who are just kind of maintaining the background process data there. But then we want to then show something for the broader organization. So yeah, we should build something nicer in a Canvas app for them. So in this example, we have then kind of this card-based user interface that shows each of these people to be onboarded there in a list where we can get to the tasks and editing them. And so this is the standard Canvas app experience that you would also have then in outside Dataverse for Teams, with slight variation, of course. There's the Fluent UI components that are exclusive to Dataverse for Teams. And then once we publish it to a team, so then we have a kind of a poor man's planner, kind of a UI there, but with the benefit that we can actually control what the filters are, what the categories are. So showing them that these persons who are onboarded or in the process, or then based on who's responsible for the tasks, or then task categories. So it gives us many different dimensions into the same data. And that's the whole solution there, nothing fancier than that. But a good example of what should be built and can be built within Dataverse for Teams, a good fit for it. Then the next scenario, which is a bit more extensive, this is about planning and tracking the capacity of an actual hospital organization. So the scenario here is that they had a process that where they periodically kind of need to plan the different types of staff and other resources that are needed for treating patients with specific types of visits, and kind of then estimating the demand and projecting that to the amount of staff that needs to be available for smooth operation of a hospital. The starting point here was that they had a fairly complex Excel workbook with lots of planning calculations, and also then the actual measurements. So the actual visits were also tracked into the same Excel workbook. So one place for both the kind of formulas, then the planning and tracking. And naturally, it's not a very good experience then for large number of users to go and open the Excels at the end of the day from their PC and enter data there. So what we did then instead was that we, of course, first of all, we modeled this the data model into Dataverse for Teams tables. Then we implemented the calculation logic there that's needed to replicate the Excel features. And then we built dedicated user interfaces for the three kind of different personas there. So for planning, then the data entry of the time spent, and then finally the analysis of the results from the planning versus actuals of the resource consumption. How does it look like then? So first, the planning side. So the user interface created here it's not pretty, but it's very functional. So this is already actually a lot more kind of more guided user interface than what a raw Excel workbook could contain. But still, it's something where the user needs to really know what they are working on, because there are many different factors that they need to enter there, and then kind of punch in the capacity that they expect to need during certain days and so on. So lots of data entry there, but still in a dedicated user interface via Teams desktop clients. Then for tracking the actuals. So on that side, we then built a mobile application for the employees to punch in the actual hours, and there then the experience is a lot more simplified and targeted. So for each of these categories of work, we then have a buttons here for how they can then add more minutes or hours into the category there. So keeping that open on their mobile phone and just during the day, maintaining the actuals by their mobile phone. And finally, then comparing the planned versus actuals. So of course, Power BI is then the tool of choice for creating that kind of metrics, because we then have the data in a structured relational database like Dataverse for Teams. So it's really easy then to build very good reports to drill down into that data compared to what they had previously in Excel. So three different user experiences on top of a single Dataverse for Teams environment. The final scenario then is about an IT self-service application. So the deal here is that the IT team needs to grant access to many requested services, such as, for example, local admin rights for the PC or the installation of specific software packages. And the starting point here was that it was all manual. So there wasn't even any internet forms through which you can request this access, but rather you need to use emails or call someone to ask for access. And of course, there was no way to then track that who approved it, when was it delivered, and so on. So a great scenario to be digitalized by Dataverse for Teams then. So what we did here was that, again, of course, we need to model this thing in Dataverse tables, and then we created an IT administrator persona app there to manage basically the services available to the end users. Then we have the employee-facing IT request application, which then is basically a catalog of all the things that you can request from IT in a standardized way. So, for example, if I need to install software X, then there could be an entry for it in that catalog. And again, so that's then available by Teams. All these things are within Teams. And also the third thing is the topic that maybe Thomas might be presenting in his session later on. So the approval process for then kind of ensuring that the person is entitled to get the service. So this could then be targeted to their managers or people within the same unit who are responsible for a set of services. And for that, we use the native approvals application inside Teams to then send these requests out via Power Automate Cloud Flows. So the example of the catalog is here, so users can browse through the services available there within Teams, in a Teams channel tab, click on to request service, then fill the details about, okay, why do I need this justification? Then click on accept terms here, click send request, and then based on who is the approver for the service or which team, then they get a native approvals request within Teams, or Outlook email, and they can easily then respond to it. So this is the standard experience that everybody has for approvals. We don't need to invent this thing. So they approve it, and then we trigger the actual delivery of the service. So there's then, for example, if we are adding users to an Azure AD group to grant the rights for them, then this will automatically do it for them and send a message, okay, you have been added there, now you have the rights because you are part of this Azure AD group automatically. And for the admin side, we can then see that we have a simplified dashboard there for showing that, okay, how many requests are there within a certain time frame there, what services have been requested, and basically a way for them to control the catalog of services available for those end users. And the important thing here from a architecture perspective is that so this is an app that's available for the whole organization, not just for the members in that single team. So we kind of host the application within a limited access team there in a Dataverse for Teams that only the admins can access. But then we publish that to the whole organization, to our Azure AD group that allows anyone to access the application. Then we pin that into channel tabs in Teams, and everybody can access it and put in the request there. And then behind the scenes, we automate things with the cloud flows and approvals, so they then take care of the backend logic there, just like you would with any other environment. So those were examples of good scenarios where you can use Dataverse for Teams. But then finally, a few words about what you need to then consider if you choose to go down this path of the Teams environment. And you need to keep in mind that it's not meant to be the full product. So if you have a very specific process, like for example, the onboarding example there, where we have a small team of users and it's a process that we would otherwise be managing in OneNote or Excel or Shepherd lists, then that's probably a great fit for Dataverse for Teams. But if you then go to these kind of organization-wide scenarios like the IT self-service, then it can very well be that you need to you may run into some architectural limitations of what you can do there before you are then breaking into the premium land that requires more licenses there. So it's important to keep in mind that even though you can always upgrade, then this can be kind of a no-go situation for customers if then the cost of that will be too high for to running in practice for a very large number of users. And I'm not going to now read through the features. I'll post you a link where you can get the slides of this session. But if you think about the features that you have in Dataverse or Teams, then yeah, you do get a lot of there just by provisioning a free Teams environment. Great stuff that you don't get within by building on top of SharePoint list, for example. But then if you go to the full thing, then it's much more that you can get with the actual Microsoft Dataverse, the premium edition there. So do pay close attention to this comparison when you are then, if you are assuming that Dataverse can do this, then make sure that it is covered within Dataverse for Teams as well, if you choose to use that as the platform. And a big thing to keep in mind is that when you build these applications in Dataverse for Teams, then that's the only place where you can access them without a premium license. So if you would then want to publish a PowerUp that runs in such an environment and use it in a browser tab, then you can do that, but the user needs the license then. So that is a boundary that will then maybe become an issue for users if they don't want to always go first to a Teams channel and search for the application there. So when you think about then, okay, where should I do these experiments of applications before I know that should I purchase licenses or not? So Dataverse for Teams can be a good choice there, but today I'd also encourage you to look at the pay-as-you-go licensing option for PowerUps. So if you already know that you will need some premium features from the full Dataverse, then think about, do I start with the limited Teams edition, or should I instead apply the pay-as-you-go model and then pay based on the resource consumption via Azure? That might actually then be a better way today to experiment with building new applications where we don't know that what's going to be the full number of users who need access to it. And then keep in mind that because everybody can create these environments, if they are team members, then there will be lots and lots of these environments in your tenant. So plan for a way then to govern these things, keep track of who is creating environments, which ones are really needed, which are just testing, and then apply things like the COE starter kit templates for governing these things in the long run. So I'm pretty much out of time already. So final words on Dataverse for Teams from my part before we hand it over to Thomas. So if we think about the way how Microsoft wants to push Teams as an operating system, then this is very much it. It's kind of the glimpse of the future in a way. But then you need to keep in mind it's also very new and it is limited by design. So it's not meant to be the solution for everything. And you should therefore not just not promise the world to customers who only have the Microsoft 365 licensing. They're prepared to pay for something that you will need on that journey when you build more extensive applications. And that's it. That was my session for today. So